Hey everybody, thank you yet again for listening to another episode of Ordinary People Extraordinary Stories. We have a brand new subscriber by my man, Richie. Thank you very much, Richie. I appreciate your support. We also want to go ahead and thank Courtney as well as Tamsin and Aiden. Give you guys all a shout out for supporting the channel. If you guys are interested in also supporting the channel, feel free to click the link below in the description to our Patreon, where you will have access to additional episodes, extra episodes, and extra bits from the show that we don't put on our Spotify and our YouTube channels. Now, with that being said, I'm going to start talking, and you're going to start listening to the next episode. Here we go. All right, everyone, put your hands together for Tristan Allen coming to the stage. Yeah, woo, thank you, appreciate it, thank you, happy to be here. Yep, hi, my name's Tristan Allen, and yeah, just a little about myself. I grew up in North Highlands, California. It's for anyone not from there, from Cali, it's essentially it's near Sacramento. It's like a little kind of pocket neighborhood. Give some backstory to it. There was a military base called McClellan Airfields. It was built in the mid-30s and was home for our boys going and coming back from WW2. You know, eventually the government decided they didn't really need the airfield and ended up closing it. People lost a lot of jobs and left a lot of families, well, off for the worse. And it made this weird thing where certain areas got richer and certain areas got poorer. And North Highlands was, to be safe, just one of those areas. Now, don't get me wrong. I loved living there. It was a very, very diverse place. And I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a great place to live. I grew up about middle class. Like, we had a house, you know, back then when you could buy them for like 2 turnips and a chicken. But we were always poor. You know, we had the house, but we had to get like our food at a gas station, our groceries. Just kind of mildly curious. Show of hands. Has anyone ever had an off-brand version of the Hot Pocket? No? No, yeah. You know what they're called? Oh, I'll tell you. They're called pizza sacks. Yeah, I'll tell you. It's just as gross as it sounds. Ended up looking like when you were cooking in the microwave, like it's just a pile of meat and bread, like an actual sack of something. Like, even eating it, you just look sad. You know, like a Sarah McLachlan pet commercial, like, on the eyes of you. Like, that playing while you're eating and tomato sauce on your face, yeah, no. But well, like I said, it was a great place to live. Might even still be. You see, growing up, the area had one thing really going for it, was just how diverse it was. I mean, I had many types of friends, all with different types of cultural and racial backgrounds, but to me, they were just my friends. Nobody really had any issues with anybody because we were all together. I mean, we had Russians, Asians, Mexicans, Indians, both kinds. Black and even white, if you could be surprised. Not to get meta with you guys here for the joke, but like while I was writing this bit or a bit, like the title of the joke I was thinking of was like songs that white people go hard in. And I'm going to get to that list in a second though, but while asking my friends, just to kind of give you an idea of like the different types of Caucasians in the area of North Highlands, we're going to use songs that best represent them. Like, so, okay. Where I grew up, you had essentially 2 types of white people. On one side of the town, you had girls like, her name was Tammy, and she's got like, you know, bow tattoos on the back of her legs. And she does some amateur acting. And like, you're picturing it. And like, she's driving in her car, and she's listening to like this, you know, the Puddle of Mud song? Like Psycho, like, you know, maybe I'm the one, maybe I'm the one who is a schizophrenic. Like she just got in a fight with her baby daddy, driving over to the other baby daddy, blaring that song, being like, yeah, like maybe I am the schizophrenic. Okay, but that's just one side of the train tracks. And then you go on the other side, all right? And you get our kind of more suburban white people. We're talking about Mr. Brightside, you know, Fallout Boy, little lion man from Mumford and Sons. Dude, nothing gets white people more hyped than banjos. Like, tell me I'm wrong. All right. Oh, okay. So let's get the audience involved. Okay, like what's some other songs that you think that get white people going?
Creed.
Oh, okay, Creed. Anything Creed, really though. But yeah, Can You Take Me Higher? Right? Like Friday night, Applebee's, 7 o'clock. Let's listen to some Creed. Let's make it happen.
Welcome to the Black Parade.
Okay. My Chemical Romance, Black Parade. Okay, it's a good choice. But to be fair, that's more just a sad teenager song. To be quite frank, most of MCR fans are actually Mexican, so we'll take like half credit for that. All right.
Don't Stop Believing.
Journey's Don't Stop Believing. Very good choice. Also just an amazing song, you know. One more. Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? Bohemian Rhapsody. Okay, dude, like that is, if white people had a spirit animal, that would be their song. Like when it comes on, it's like a lightning bolt to the soul for my people. Like we all try to sing in unison, and like that scene in Wayne's World, totally not an exaggeration. You see, the whole funny thing about writing this joke was seeing that there are really different shades of white. We got eggshell and Swiss coffee and pale smoke. And there is a color called oatmeal, which I think is the funniest thing. Because, like, I've looked at oatmeal before and immediately thought of a white person. Please tell me I'm not the only one. Like, it's, you know, it's kind of like gray and mushy and goopy. And, like, I look at it, I'm like, oh my God, that's Steve. I haven't called him in a while. You know, if you aren't laughing, then I think you're actually the oatmeal person. All right, guys, that was my set. Thank you very much for having a good night. Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Ordinary People, Extraordinary Stories. My name's Tristan Allen, and I appreciate you sticking around for the set. That's right, because today's episode we're all talking about stand-up comedy. Yes, the big ha-ha and the big hee-hee. My guest, Alfie Noakes, is actually he's an entertainer, plain and simple. He started a project called the We Are Funny Project, where essentially he kind of breaks down not only like tips to being a better stand-up performer, but more importantly, why it's so important for every day life experience situation. I mean, it is such a handy skill to make people laugh. You can disarm tense situations, you can make friends quickly, which makes performing tasks well, to just having confidence, which, man, I'm still working on it, but like, man, when I get it, I'm gonna be unstoppable, guys. But yes, today we're getting into that, and I only thought it appropriate to give you a little stand-up 5-minute set for you. Try something new. So if you guys like that, or are mildly interested though, I'll put way more work into it next time, but I might put more of these on the Patreon, which is a good segue into the Patreon. This is a very long intro, but it's my show, and you came here for me, baby. But anyways, back to our guest. Yes, Alfie Noakes has emceed over 10,000 gigs. He's a very prominent British entertainer. He does comedy, though. He tells stories. And if you're interested, he has a YouTube channel as well as an online book and course. If you ever want to look into how to maybe even write jokes better, write jokes at all, or just want to try something new, we'll make sure to provide his website down below in the description. Plugging aside, with that being said, let's get nice, comfy, and quiet. Please silence your cell phones and turn them on to vibrate if you don't mind. And please put your hands together for another ordinary person with extraordinary story. find out, my guy. So, yeah, I did send you my stand-up set list. I know you're a bit of a, I want to say a comedy sensei. Not even a comedy sensei. You just you got your class and whatnot. But before we kind of get into that, though, what was your thoughts? Like, what could I have done better? What did I do good?
From watching the comedy set you sent me through. Remind me, how many gigs in were you when you recorded that set?
That was probably my first official one. I probably did maybe less than 20 at that point.
Okay, well, it was very polished straight away. So you were word perfect. There was no flustering, none of the classic, oh, what was I saying? Where was I? So you got your script down tight and you had excellent eye range on the room. You kept moving around and addressing the room. You didn't fall into any of the kind of classic rookie errors of being nervous and therefore talking too quickly. Because if you talk too quickly and you mumble and then the audience can't hear that punchline, then they can't possibly laugh. So you were very friendly, you were very engaging, you moved around brilliantly, and you'd memorized everything. For somebody that early in the comedy curve, you did exceptionally well. As far as the material goes, there was less shots on goal, as we'd call it, which is actually efforts to drop a punchline and elicit a joke than we would want. You're typically looking for, in a 5 minute set, I think this set was about 7.5 minutes, but you're typically aiming to get 3 laughs a minute. That's kind of the target. Nobody as early in their career path as you will ever achieve that. That's completely unreasonable to expect, but that is the goal. Your shot on goal to get a laugh from the audience was probably nearer 5 or 6 right out shots in the entire set. And that's just a case of you hadn't written the material to get to that. But you were very likable, and your solid premise there, your quarter life crisis, I think what that demonstrated was 2 things. One, it's an interesting idea, and it will be different for each person. Obviously, the quarter life crisis isn't just your idea. I've heard that notion before, but how you would handle a quarter life crisis, that's how it kind of came across. It made us know something about you. That is not something wild and reckless. It's actually an ear piercing, which is no great big thing. And you painted nice pictures. I could envisage you in Claire's. I'm assuming this is a chain store in America we have here called Claire's Accessories.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. So I'm very familiar with it. They're on every high street here. Yeah. I mean, you're a fish out of water there. You being this older fellow with a beard amongst a bunch of 14-year-old girls who are getting their first piercings.
Exactly. Not creepy at all, right? Totally not creepy. Yeah.
Exactly. What might have been nice, and this is just a classic with everybody who's early days in comedy, is to go deeper into your premise. So what else would a quarter life crisis look like? And a good way of doing that would have been to establish what the classic midlife crisis is associated with. Classically, it's having an affair with a younger woman, going and buying a sports car to, make up for that small dick deficit that is associated with that kind of behavior. So outlining what a half-life midlife crisis looks like for the audience and attaching a couple of jokes and then spinning into your exact version of it for a quarter life crisis. But you were perfectly charming, perfectly engaging, perfectly audible, really friendly, very easy to like. It's just a case you need to write more jokes to put into the set. And for less than 20 gigs in, really nice, really polished.
You heard it here, people. I'm perfect. Nothing needs to be worked on. Gonna just continue my comedy journey. And if anything, I'm gonna host the Oscars next year.
It's probably best to be able to say Oscars before you host the Oscars.
Well, see, that's why I'm gonna hire you. You're gonna coach me. You're just gonna get that nice little British charm. Get my Ricky Gervais on. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to another episode of Ordinary People Extraordinary Stories. No, I'm not sitting with Simon Cowell here, but this is my good friend Alfie. I actually don't think I know your last name. Alfie Noakes. Yeah, that's also probably. There you go.
Your
hey,
good friend.
Hey, we're working on it. We have an hour and 30. But yeah, no, so his story again really caught me off guard. Is that you reached out to me. You listened to one of my episodes. It's funny we're talking about as far as like the polished set because you want to think how clean that was. I mean, I did the work, but it was that Keith Lowell Jensen episode you were listening to. He was the guy who taught me. That was the class I took under him. And I've kind of always like flirted with comedy though, but he's really kind of helped tighten it up and say, hey, try to go this way, try to go that way, or kind of explain like, here's how ideally you want to write a joke. So again, shout out to Keith. Thanks for the help there. But no, what really made me appreciate you was just, again, your approach to comedy. I think we even talked offline. You said you're not necessarily a stand-up comedian, you're an MC, is that you believe that the film industry, the movie industry, we're making a movie and making a set very parallel. It's almost identical. and you teach a class as such. And I love that approach, and I want to have you on here and talk more about that. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So, I mean, let's get into it.
Well, there's a whole load of overlap as I am a promoter. I'm well known in London. I run a group called the We Are Funny Project. We've just had our 10th anniversary this year, earlier this year. But I was running shows for about 3 years prior to that. So, you know, the numbers are all quite big. I've put on over 1,800 shows. I've emceed over 1,000 myself. I've had over 10,000 acts perform on my stages. But as far as actually doing stand-up myself, I don't think I did more than 9 stand-up gigs. I was already co-running an open mic night with a friend as a hobby. Had a few goes at it. I crushed on my first gig. I did very, very well, and then made that fatal mistake because very few people do well on their first gig. I've watched over 500 people do their first gig, and less than half a dozen did well. It's just the nature of the beast. It's really about building up the psychological armor to get up there and have a go. Whether or not you get laughs is almost besides the point.
Which is a bad, because that when that happens, so that's the whole point, is that they kind of messes up their armor, or they think, hey, I don't need the armor, or they're not prepared for it, and then the time they do bomb, it's like,
I don't even think they're very often even aware of the armor. I think, certainly for my case, and a couple of friends that I've spoken to had a similar experiences, we just got really cocky really quickly. We just went, oh, this is easy. You know, in the scheme of open mic gigs, it wasn't a bad one. In the scheme of first open mic gigs, it was an especially good one. But in the world of pro comics, it was nothing whatsoever. But I got cocky, and on my second gig, just thought I was a natural at this. There's no such thing as somebody who's truly a natural. You've still always got to do the work and find the original ideas and write those jokes and tag them and everything else that comes.
You gotta shit the bed. You gotta. You have to fail.
Yeah, you have to fail. That's certainly where you come to building up that armor you were talking about. But by and large, people just need to get up there, give it a go, and then they'll start working out the different elements about, I need more punchlines here, I need less umming, ahhing, I need a more original idea, I need to delve into it more deeply, I need to find a new angle, I need to do an act out here. All of the different kind of skill sets can only come with experience and stage time. I have something of an arbitrary line in the sand. Like the first year of somebody who's taking it somewhat seriously, they should be doing a couple of gigs a week minimum. That comes to 100 gigs in the first year. That's just phase one. That's finding your feet, getting a sense of what works, what doesn't. You might be close to a tight 5 in that time period. And then also making friends on the circuit, building up your confidence, getting a sense that this material got big laughs in that room on Tuesday. Why didn't it work in this room tonight? And it could be down to the nature of the audience, the nature of the room, the act that was on before you. The MC is such an important element in any show. You know, some MCs can pull a show down and make it harder work for everybody else. But if you've got a good MC and a hot room, sometimes even not particularly great material can feel like it's great material, and you build from there. So a certain amount of experience is needed. And I think phase one is a couple of gigs a week for a year to get to that first 100 gigs. And then you can really start finding your feet, finding your voice, and deciding you want to go further with this.
And you guys kind of curious as kind of like how you started though. Cause I mean, you said you did a couple open mics, you killed it. You thought, okay, this is easy. I mean, were you always kind of in the movie film industry, or like, how did you get into there? And then when did you kind of make that, like, that change from like, okay, hey, I'm doing this, I did a little comedy, but I can put these together. Like, when did that happen?
It wasn't quite as that. I was a major movie maniac as a kid, and there was a TV show here that brought in young people to do film reviews 30 years ago now, and they picked me to be on that show.
What's it called?
Movie Watch.
It was 30 years ago, so
30 years ago.
I might be able to find it, maybe on YouTube. You think it's
there's some clips of it on YouTube on there. I don't think I'm in one of them, but there are certainly clips from that show. And it was, you know, it was a really, really quality show, youth-oriented movie show. Would get interviews with all the big stars, go do set reports, would do short films, like how to do a British youth movie, parody of Train Spotting, because that had come out in one of our later seasons, and then how to do a parody of, or rather we did a parody of you know, British Regency films, you know, the Merchant Ivory type of things. It was a very funny show. We had a great presenter called Johnny Vaughan. He went on to be pretty much the biggest TV star in this country afterwards. So yeah, having appeared on that show and demonstrated how much I knew about movies, they offered me a job on the next season. I was the guy making the teas, picking up the post, the runner. And then I worked my way up to producer director by the last season and found my niche working on film shows. I did other shows as well because it's a freelance world. So Sometimes I'd direct a hidden camera show or whatever it might be. But by and large, my specialty was doing film shows. I was a reporter on BBC Radio 1, our big national youth station here, for a couple of years. I did all sorts of documentaries. I did a series called Fatal Productions about people who died for real during the making of a film. So, of course, I kicked off with Brandon Lee on The Crow, but there was a stunt pilot called Art Scholl who died on Top Gun. A stunt lady called Sonia Davis died on the Eddie Murphy film Vampire in Brooklyn. So over a 13-year career, I did most of the TV and radio shows in England, Great Britain, that focused on the cinema.
Which is great because, like, there was actually a movie or a series called Cursed Films. Same thing. It's like the whole, you were doing something that's now relevant that everyone would talk about nowadays because it's like they know all the information, but you're doing it like, hey, what's going on here? Why are these people doing these things, or at least like passing away when it's like, okay, is this as safe as we thought it was going to be? And I didn't want to talk about Brandon Lee. I missed that guy.
Yeah, no, that was a really rough story. I mean, the odds of that happening the way it happened was extraordinary. But I mean, that was a show. The Fatal Productions was a show I did in the early 2000s, I think. But that was just really to demonstrate kind of I was across doing film reporting, whether I was interviewing the stars or writing the questions for my presenter to do it, or ultimately, visiting sets, directing set reports and the like. And then I found out I was going to be a father, so I quit the TV business, set up a company just in time for the 2008 banking crisis.
Did it affect you guys overseas too? I know it affected us. Like,
oh mate, that was a global disaster. Yeah, no, that bankrupted me. So I was a new father with a new business, and within 6 months I was bankrupted. And so in that ether, I'd started running an open mic night with a friend. He was already like an open mic comedian and running a night, and he wanted to do a new one, and he asked me to help with it. And I've always been a huge stand-up comedy fan, and I also had a secret desire to give it a go, but I'd never found the stones to do it. And then on that first night, helping to run the show, I caught, I think, 5 joke thieves.
Oh, damn. All right.
And was able to name, like, that's Billy Connolly from Billy at the Albert Hall 1986. That's Robin Williams live in the Met. To be clear, I've done close on 2,000 shows since. I've never caught more than 2 joke thieves in a night since. It's extremely rare. But on that night, that first night, it made me realize how much I actually do know about stand-up.
There you go.
That I could catch these people. And then lay down the law that, of course, you can't do that. Joke theft is the ultimate sin in comedy.
I mean, look at Carlos Mencia. I mean, that boy stopped having a career after I found out.
He was a great comedian in his time, though. I mean, I really enjoyed Carlos Mencia, but you can't be behaving the way that, that the world now knows he did. But I thoroughly enjoyed his comedy before I found out that, he was behaving in such a way.
That's a whole other story. But I mean, okay, so you had the open mic, which, by the way, I mean, like, just had a baby, just did this thing. I mean, was it pulling the money to raise a family, or did you have to do like another job?
No, there was no money in it at all. No, there's no money. It was just a kind of a hobby to keep me kind of a little bit focused, something to do, meeting kind of a new community of people. And after a few months, I had a go at emceeing, and that's why I really shone. I said I did those few gigs, but it wasn't for me. I've got many reasons I don't want to be a natural comedian. But the emceeing, that worked for me. And then ultimately, I split with the guy that I was running those shows with, and I just really ramped it up. I rebranded it as We Are Funny Project. We were at 2 venues running 6 shows a week for a good 2 or 3 years. And then I started bringing in professional comedians to teach workshops. I was burning myself out as an MC. I couldn't MC so many shows, and I couldn't find, MCing is a very particular art. So I brought in one of the best MCs in Britain to start teaching workshops, teaching the open mic guys how to do it, and then would give some of them an opportunity to MC my nights, and then a community built up around us.
You want to shout out that person, that MC?
That was Stephen Grant. Stephen Grant, arguably the best MC in Britain. He runs the Forge Club in Brighton. A fantastic comedian and a fantastic promoter in his own right.
It's so, and when this is good, I want to try to figure out, it's like, again, like, how did you just work a little side job on the side, or like how did you, again, because that gotta be insanely stressful. New baby, you're doing this hobby, and again, like, maybe, and I'm asking you 2 questions here, but can you kind of explain to the audience like why it's difficult to MC, like what it kind of entails versus doing regular stand-up comedy?
Well, you've got 2 things that you should really be bearing in mind as an MC, whereas a comedian is typically only thinking about themselves and the time they're on stage, whereas my first responsibility is not to the audience or to the act. My first responsibility is to the show itself. So my agenda is not quite the same as a possibly needy comedian or a difficult audience member. I do want to look after them all. I have a duty of care to everybody, but I can't let any one or two egos disrupt the show for any reason whatsoever. So I'm looking at, I've got just totally different agenda as the show goes on, other than the shared desire to make this audience laugh, which I'm more than capable of doing routinely. But it's to keep the show moving at pace, making sure that everybody's been treated fairly. I wouldn't let people arrive late. I expected like a professional standard from an amateur crowd of comedians, making sure that nobody's getting a special favors because they know me, making sure that people play to time, getting them off stage in time, and then really just being quite engaging with the crowd in between. So I'm good at the crowd work. I've got a colourful life. I've got plenty of funny stories. And at the risk of flattering myself, I'm reasonably fast off the cuff. So doing that crowd work and back referencing something that's happened in the room in the last couple of minutes, I kind of found a place for that kind of skill set. So instead of being out looking to write jokes all the time, I can lean on life stories or riffing as the day's going on. But going back to the workshops, you know, I started with Stephen as emceeing, but in the end, I think we've had like 16 different workshops, from everything from mimicry and satire, writing comedy for radio, television, character comedy, musical comedy, comedy storytelling, punching up your stand-up, all of these with professionals. And obviously, by definition, I get to take the workshop because I'm in there producing the workshop. I get to take it. And then in that period, I would be emceeing 4 shows a week. So I'd take some of their ideas of what you should or should not do in certain aspects of comedy and then go on stage and do it, or do the thing they said not to do to test if their theory was correct. So that was a really, you know, incredible learning curve for me. So over the years, I got the experience of emceeing over 1,000 shows, but I also got the privilege of being taught by, you know, some of the best comedians in Britain. Our clowning workshop, for example, our clowning workshop is taught by Dave Thompson. He's the guy that was Tinky Winky in the Teletubbies. Absolutely amazing.
What? Okay, that's biggest name drop we're gonna have on this episode. Heck yeah.
It's quite possible. You don't get much bigger than Tinky Winky.
Honestly, man, he was the G. Like, I have to sing the song to remember. He's the purple one, right?
To be honest, I don't know. He probably is, but I don't know.
Man, not gonna get into that just because that whole show was a trip. Like, I think people were on acid when they like created, oh my God, like weird alien monsters with TV stomachs and a baby son. Yeah, no, it's whole nother.
The lady that created that show is one of the richest people in Britain. I think she's created like 3 global hit children's shows now. She had In the Night Garden as well, and another one. You know, every Tinky Winky t-shirt that lady has been paid for. She's kind of J.K. Rowling level of success, but nobody knows her name.
I can only imagine if we found out who she was, like we'd go to her house and there's like a sex dungeon or there's some weird thing going on. It's like, okay, now it makes sense. Like, okay, there we go.
I should have spoken more clearly. People do know her name. Her name is in fact Sue. And she's not a household name, whereas everybody knows who J.K. Rowling is. Most people don't know who Sue is, but she's at the same level of success.
Now we got to find her because, like, again, like we got to go rescue maybe the children or the injured animals that are definitely in her torture basement. Like, I don't know. Back to comedy, comedy and torture, hand in hand. There we go. As far as like, and I mean, you learned all this stuff, which is great. The fact is that you got these classes for free. That you were like, people were telling you, hey, here's the secrets of the tips, and then you got the chance to try them out. You still wouldn't want to do comedy, even though like the fact that you got the bag and you got the talent.
No, it's a lifestyle choice. If you're serious in comedy and you want to become a professional, it's a several-year career path anyway through the open mic rooms. But after that, you're going to be traveling all the time. And as I mentioned, I had a new child. The reason I set up a new company was because in my television career, I was doing so well. I think 4 of my last 5 shows had been shot overseas, which was what my long-term ambition had been, to be sent filming programs overseas. But once I knew I had a child on the way, I wanted to be present and around. That was the reason I left television. Set up a company in a different industry that went badly for the reasons I explained. So in the aftermath, that's why I ended up as just as a hobby running these shows. I think the shows began, it was once every 2 weeks, and then very quickly I moved up to once a week. And then by the time I split with my partner at the time, I think maybe we were 1 or 2 shows a week. I very quickly got us up to 6 a week, and then brought in all these different formats of shows as well. It wasn't just pure open mic. I would start creating formats. So one would be a challenge show. I'd handpick 12 of my favorite acts from pro, semi-pro acts to really interesting new open micers. And then I'd invite them to perform on a date, say August the 8th, would you do this show? Would you commit to doing 5 minutes on that date? And then with them all committed, 2 weeks before the event, I would give them a topic. It could be worst sex ever, first job, worst boss, virginity, favorite World Cup, whatever it might happen to be. Often we would peg them to a current event. And then they would all come in and perform this brand new material on the first night. And some of those acts changed their careers entirely. So one of them decided to be musical for one of these shows just to try something new. And now he's a successful professional on the British circuit who's a musical act. And that probably wouldn't have happened if he hadn't tried to stretch his wings with the challenge show. So over the years, I think we had half a dozen so different formatted shows. Do you want to hear about the worst one, the one that went wrong?
Yep, that sounds great.
So we did one for Paddy's Day, St. Patrick's Day, which I'm sure you're aware is just a national license, a global license for everybody to drink.
It's like that and Cinco de Mayo. Like those are like the two dangerous ones.
Yeah. Well, I think the Irish have the edge on drinking. I don't think there's many Irish people that would suggest otherwise. So the idea for this show is I handpicked 8 of my favorite acts. And the idea is they come up, they do their normal 5-minute set. But before they leave the stage, when I come back on as their host, as their MC, I give them either a pint of beer or a large glass of wine or a double shot of spirits. They had to down one of them before they left the stage. And then an hour later, in the second half, they have to come and perform this same 5 minutes of comedy again. However, in the intervening hour, we did nothing but pump them with as much booze, alcohol as we possibly could. And then they have to perform the same set so drunk.
And you didn't see any like bad things happening with this. You're like, no, this is going to be fun. This is going to be great.
Yeah, exactly. It was probably a little naive of me. Of the 8 acts, 3 went to hospital in an ambulance. We couldn't talk about that show for about 7 years for fear of litigation.
And anything, I mean, like at least, no one got seriously hurt, that kind of stuff. Did anyone like fight or like overly flirt with the audience or just being generally creepy?
No, it was just more about people tripping up and passing out, being sick in the corner of the room, that kind of thing. But it wasn't a format I ever repeated. Many of my other formats, were done a dozen or more times, while we really ironed out the creases and got them working. But that was a one-time.
I can imagine just like, I don't know what you are as a blackout drinker. I found out I think I'm a crier. I'm definitely a crier. But it's like an I love you crier. It's like I'm so full of emotion that I just love you. I gotta tell you.
I like this. I like the way you said that you said, I think when I blackout drink, I'm a crier. Because by definition of being blacked out, you don't know, do you? You just got to hear it from your friends.
And because like the last time I drank, it was a plastic bottle vodka. It was $3. So you just can imagine the dirty shoe polish I was drinking. I was just like it was awful. But I just remember I was just talking to my wife, and then I forgot. And then that's when I was talking to my wife just yesterday, and she's like, "Yeah, dude, you wouldn't stop telling me how much you love me, and you were crying." I'm like, "It checks out, I'm a big softie."
That's not bad. That's a good psychological bump for her. Anytime she feels she needs one, is just furnish you with a $3 bottle of vodka and then bring it on.
Exactly. Well, okay. I mean that's again really cool that you even started this project. But let's go back to the question I think I asked at the very beginning. As far as like, how does this and the film industry, how does stand-up comedy and the film industry kind of go hand in hand with this? Or how can you essentially approach stand-up with the mentality of making a film or making a movie?
Sure. So I was doing, after several years of running the rooms and running the shows, I'd been up close and personal with thousands of people, watching what worked, watching what didn't, watching people progress and improve. So as I'm not a comedian, as I've made clear, I've had an up close kind of front seat view of what does and doesn't work and what approaches people have taken. And ultimately, I became a one-on-one coach for stand-ups. And I would use the premise for them is that you are the lowest budget film director in the world. You are creating images to be painted in the minds of the audience. You just don't need to worry about having a director of photography and a production designer and all of the costs that go with it. And so that's where the premise began. And then I realized that was kind of reductive. Every open mic comedian, every amateur comedian is already their own writer. The story by credit because they're coming up with the ideas. They're also their own producer, director, and leading role. And then when you go a little bit further, there's other aspects. Instead of taking individuals from the film industry, such as a producer, a director, a leading actor, there's also categories of filmmaking departments that applies, whether it's marketing and publicity to hair, makeup, and wardrobe. They're also going to have to navigate things such as competitions and agents, critics and reviewers. So once I realized that this extended pretty much across the board, so many of the things comedians were having to do, they've got two things to do. One is generate what they do on stage, but if they've got ambition and they want to move away from open mic to paid and pro gigs, then there's like an industry aspect of things to navigate. And as I say, things like competitions, critics, reviewers, agents. Ultimately, they're aiming for an agent. The agent will then hold their hand and move them into the paid and pro arena. They'll work with them and develop them. So my idea was to develop this whole course. It began, as I say, with one-on-one coaching, but this is now a recorded online course called Stepping Forward in Stand-Up. But I call this the cinematic system of stand-up. And it gets cinematic system of stand-up, yeah. Stepping Forward in Stand-Up is the advanced comedy course. It's designed to get people from being solid advanced open mic acts to actually getting somewhere near to an agent and getting paid, regular paid gigs, even ultimately becoming pro. But obviously that's a very big leap. There's only a handful that make it to the pro leagues.
I was gonna say, I mean, sorry to keep asking a name drop. I mean, do you have anybody that you're like, I'm so proud this guy was my student, or like, hey, check this guy out. This guy was, humble beginnings.
I can't name anybody that was a student because I think that's on the private side of things. But also these courses haven't been running that long that it would have helped somebody to make the move from here to there. But I have certainly coached people in the past that have now become, certainly they've appeared on some of the bigger British TV shows such as Live at the Apollo and Have I Got News for You, and regularly on BBC Radio 4 and the like. Pretty much because I've been doing this 13 years now. There's a whole generation of people who did either their first set or amongst their first sets with me in my room, were regulars with me. And I haven't seen them anywhere near any of my rooms for years now because they're professional and they're being paid, the real money for the real gigs, TV, writing opportunities, and everything else. But yeah, there's almost a generation, if not two generations of comedians now that kind of began in my rooms and other rooms. It wasn't only me, of course. But I used to know them really rather well because they were regulars, they were promising, they were by and large nice people. So I got to know them, but then they move on and a new generation moves in.
As it does, but I mean, it's kind of two things I'm kind of like curious about though. Is I guess one of the questions you had on your website though was just like, why would maybe somebody who necessarily doesn't want to do stand up, or it's like, why is it important for maybe anybody to learn this skill? Like, I mean, what are, I guess, the positives or like the bonuses of maybe learning how to do stand-up comedy? Like, can it translate to other departments in life?
Yeah, no, the skills from comedy are transferable, but there's more to it than even that. Most people, when you tell them you do comedy, you've done some yourself, so you're probably familiar with this. You mention you do comedy, and almost everybody's response is, "I could never do that. You're so brave."
Exactly.
A word to this effect. For most people, public speaking is a top fear. And the idea of doing public speaking with the ambition of making them laugh, and obviously equally taking the risk of trying to make them laugh and failing, and the embarrassment that might come with that, is enough to scare most people away. So those who have the stones to do it, whether or not they are any good, already have something in their character that they can take pride in. I'm always very clear that first gig is never about getting laughs, though you should try, and if you get them, wonderful. But nobody's going to get more than 3 or 4 in their first gig, with a handful of exceptions. It's about crossing the psychological Rubicon of knowing you had the courage to get up there and do it. And then having done that, then you can come back again and really maybe focus a little bit more on getting those laughs. So there's something about building self-esteem. Whether or not the set goes well is besides the point. One should feel proud of oneself for having the courage to get up and do it. And then shortly after should come that sensation of the first joke you tell that does get a proper big laugh, not just a laugh, but a big laugh. Wow, the energy that comes from that's like feeling like a rock star stuff right there. And that's often when people get what we call the bug, and they're really into their comedy and they're gigging as often as they can, and they're not just down the pub with their friends on a Tuesday night. Now they're going to be at a gig. I know many people that have sacrificed many friendships and relationships because they decided comedy was their thing. So it can become a hobby. It can become a place to be. There's a community of people, whichever region you're in. Very quickly, you start getting to know the other acts. because you're watching them perform. You're going to chat with them, hopefully, after the show. It's very easy to make friends in the comedy community. All you have to do is say to a comedian, I really enjoyed your set tonight. And, you know, you've begun a conversation. Nobody's going to turn their back on you there. And soon enough, I'm in London. It's probably the healthiest comedy community in the world, one of the largest in the world. You know, you can go to, I don't know, easily 50 shows a week are happening in this city, I would say. But you can rotate through those gigs and you're still going to see some familiar faces very quickly. So just as a friendship group, as a community to dip into, some people might join a golf club and play golf. Some people might just be a regular in their pub. And some people will trawl around different bars and venues around London and see different, either new faces or familiar faces, have that friendship group. But the skills that come with comedy, I mean, first and foremost, typically people get along with people who make them laugh. It's just a really great social skill. My son did his first stand-up set in front of a live audience when he was 7.
Oh, wow.
Just because by virtue of what his dad does. But by the time he was 12, he'd done over 30 gigs.
Oh, my God.
And I don't know whether there's a direct correlation, but he's a very confident young man who has no issues about speaking publicly. Whereas I can see some of his friends become a little bit nervous, and he's 16 now, might be a little bit nervous even talking in front of me when they haven't met me before. So the skill of public speaking is in so many businesses, so many walks of life, even if it's just speaking to your colleagues. A lot of people are freelance now. We've got what we call the gig economy here. I don't know if you really use the same expression over there, but people moving in and out of jobs. There's very rarely a job for life with one big corporation any longer. And if you can turn up at a new workplace and, you know, drop a couple of funny jokes, you know, a few funny observations, you're kind of off to a flying start with your new colleagues. And if you're trying to sell something to somebody, one of my favorite comedians made the point, you know, he's a business manager by day, and by evening, he's the leader of a heavy metal band and also a really cracking comedian.
Who's this guy? Because this guy sounds badass. Like,
his name's Howard Smith. He's with a band called Acid Rain. Rain spelt REIGN, as in you know, the reign of a king or a queen.
Okay, I will.
But he pointed out to me years ago when he's doing the setup to a joke, that's the pitch, as though selling something to somebody, and then the punchline is the close. And if he tells them the punchline and they don't laugh, it means he's got to come back and try harder.
There you go.
And I think that's a really healthy way of approaching each joke, but also whatever you're doing in your day job, if you've got to sell something literally, you know, for money, or you could just be selling an idea to a colleague or a boss. If you can do it with a little bit of comedy, it helps that, you know, spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. And so is comedy.
Well, okay. And I just like you hit the nail on the head, public speaking. I mean, and I even remember when I was like taking like speech in like college, though, again, they're saying like this is really important because again, like with interviews, you watch like a sports interview, like, hey, you just won the big game, champ. What are you gonna do when you get home? He's like, McDonald's by like to be able to again.
To be fair though, they're sports guys, and typically speaking, not always. Muhammad Ali is my great hero, but typically speaking, they're not the most erudite, verbally flexible people in the world. And also they've probably just had their head mashed in whatever sport they're playing for quite a while, and they're a little bit stunned. Yeah. Whereas opposed to people who perform comedy, or maybe actors, for example, you know, their craft is words, the words they speak and how they deliver them. So there is, it's maybe a little bit apples and oranges to compare them against.
Well, I guess I'll say this though. It's like, as far as like what I'm doing here, like this is something I like that, the gig economy though, because that is very much something where I'm trying to find like maybe not even just forever job, just again, find something where I enjoy it until I find the next thing. But I mean, it sounds like if anything, like your course, or at least your thing, could potentially even help my podcast venture. Help me, I mean, like you mentioned, I'm pretty funny and pretty observant. I can make at least a decent couple of jokes, though. But do you think like if I took your course, it would only maybe refine my podcasting or at least my interviewing skills even better?
I don't think my course speaks specifically to interviewing. And remember, that's what I did in my previous career. I interview people all the time. What I think it might help with would be your ability to be funnier with your guests, which can only be a boost to the entertainment value of your podcast, and then hopefully therefore build its popularity. So I don't think it would help with the podcasting thing as such, but I think it would help with the way you are on your podcast, and that in itself can only be a bonus. You would be more funny. You would probably find maybe new angles into the people you're talking to, and maybe it might spruce up some of the questions you think of in advance, for example. My mentor in television told me, because we got all the big stars will be in on their publicity junkets. Basically, the way it would work is they take X big star, hire out a hotel suite, 2 cameras rolling, and then my presenter will come in, sit down in the chair, and then they'll have 6 minutes to interview Sylvester Stallone or whoever. And then we vacate the chair, and the next TV show presenter comes in, they sit down, they've got 6 minutes. And all of the other guys and companies would go, so what's your new film about? Because it's all about publicity. What attracted you to this role? If they've got a famous film star, what was it like working with fill in the blank? And these stars are so damn bored of it. And then they're going to fly out the next day and do the same thing in Holland. And then 3 days later, they'll be in Japan doing the same thing. And it's part of their job. They know it, but they've got to look like they're interested and try and answer the same banal questions, just with different words to keep themselves involved. So my mentor taught me, like, we never begin with a question like, what attracted you to this role? Tell me what your film is about. So we had Sam Jackson for an interview one time. I think it was for the film 187. So it wasn't that long after Pulp Fiction. And instead of us going to what's your film 187 about, we said, so Pulp Fiction, millstone or milestone? Now, immediately, that's not a yes or no answer. He has to stop and think about that for a second. He wasn't even expecting a question not about this movie. And you could just see him sit up in his seat and kind of engage his brain, and then gave us a really full answer. And now he liked us, because we'd given him something to work with, as opposed to everybody else that was cookie cutter. So coming up with an original question delivered briefly, these questions, you want them to be short so that your presenter can remember them and they can grasp them immediately. But coming in with a question that they wouldn't typically be asked. We had Sylvester Stallone on 2 occasions over the years, liked our presenter so much that when our 6 minutes or however long we had was up, he would just wave away the PR people and go, no, I'm enjoying this. Let's keep going.
There you go.
Like, that only happened with 2 or 3 people ever, but that shows we're doing it right. We were entertaining them as much as they were entertaining us. So very long answer to your question. Please forgive me for that.
No, we like long answers.
I think my course would help you, not through the prism of podcasting as such, but it would help you come up with improved ways of being funny or coming up with funnier questions, if that's what you would like to achieve.
Ideally, I don't have a child that I'm taking care of though, but it is something where I would like to eventually have children and them to be able to maybe see like why I'm asking these questions, why I want to care, why I'm getting into these roots or these issues or even just these conversations with people. Or maybe they can say, oh, I can kind of see the value in these questions. I can see the value in the people sharing or their stories or the power and that kind of stuff. And I'm learning the more I want to do this stuff again. It's not just editing. It's not just advertising. It's not just asking the right questions. Sometimes again, it's can I be funnier? Can I listen better? Can it's just there's more factors to play into it. So anything I can kind of help push this thing to the next level is something ideally I would want to do. And I think.
Well, you and I have gotten along very well. We had a conversation before we recorded today, and you're a very friendly guy, and we've gotten well really straight away. But building rapport with people is a big thing. Like in comedy, there's a concept of status. So if you come in and if you can mark it out of 10, an actor with the status of 10 out of 10, Bill Hicks, the late great Bill Hicks, would sometimes begin his set by walking on stage and go to his audience, opening a comedy show, let me plaster on a fake smile and plow through this shit one more time to come up with entertaining ideas that you people could not possibly dream of for yourselves. Wow. That is a high status gambit to open up a comedy show, but it established he's right up here and the audience better strap in and get ready for this. Okay. That's high status. Most people will have a rapport with somebody who they feel is somewhat on their same level of status. So comedy will teach that. It teaches you any number of ways of building a rapport with people. And rapport is exactly something that film actors need with one another. And it's also something that interviewers need with their interviewees. It just greases the world so that your life is just that much easier. Because if you're getting along with people and avoiding conflict because they like you, they find you entertaining, they'd love for you to be at their party. They want to show you off. I've got this really funny guy at work. He's great. Come and check him out. Whatever it might be. All of these skills are just life skills in the first place. But comedy, stand-up comedy, allows one to concentrate those skills, even if it's just in 5-minute or 10-minute blocks.
We're going to go back to Bill Hicks later. But as far as people who wanted to, maybe again, we've sold them. They're like, okay, I want to be funny. I want to try this. I want to break that psychological hold that stage fright has over me. How could they potentially get into
Hmm.
this? How can they contact you? I mean, what do your services look like essentially?
Well, if first of all, if somebody wants to get into stand-up comedy, they don't necessarily need my help. I mean, I'm obviously here in London and you're there across the pond, but most significantly sized towns have at least one, if not more, open mic nights. So it's a case of tracking those down, getting in touch with the booker, the promoter, and saying, I'd love to book a spot. How do I go about it? So that's always been the path in. But if somebody wants to kind of hit that stage with a few more skills, a little bit more confidence, a greater understanding of different means of writing jokes, no one book or course could ever cover the massive topic that is comedy. I wouldn't presume to say how the greatest comedians do it or have done it. But as with anything, whether you're learning the guitar, you want to learn some basic chords first before you start doing a wheelie on your bicycle. You probably want to learn how to just pedal, you know. And so getting some of the essential skills and some essential ideas, one of the basic ideas of comedy, it's almost every joke is based on surprise.
Mm,
So once that's recognized, I was a bad pool player until I played with a really good guy one day and he gave me one single tip, which is just to go lower on the table and look down the
mm,
cue. Okay. My game improved by 50% without one
okay.
single piece of information. And my courses are packed with information. So whether it's piecemeal, a little bit here, a little bit there, or it could be there's just two or three golden nuggets that give somebody the handle on how to get better.
Just even having just one nugget though might just be enough to justify the whole course because it's like, hey, it took me to that next level. I was going from doing a lot of amateur stuff to now I'm hitting this pro stuff, or I can advertise myself better, or I can interact with agents more. So, but
Well, the three courses I have are designed to help people pretty much across the spectrum. I don't believe I have a fourth course in me because I think I've
yeah,
covered everything now. So the first one is for beginners. It's for those people that I mentioned earlier on that I consider phase one, people who either haven't tried comedy yet or within their first 100 gigs. And what I often find is people who are at about 50 plus gigs now think that they're above this course, stepping into stand-up comedy. They think because they're 50 or 60 gigs in, they're now too experienced for it. They don't know what they don't know. I know that there's still a ton of information for them that will be really helpful, even if they have been gigging for 6 months. There will be still new. I think there's 7 joke writing techniques in there, very practical exercises. No two people would write 2 jokes the same from following this because it invites them to bring in themselves, aspects of themselves, their own observations, their own life experience. But that first course will help people navigate the scene, get a better idea of how to book better rooms, more rooms, get more gigs, and how to arrive with confidence and have some sense that, yeah, I'm not just shooting in the dark here. I've got some real solid advice that's given me some real solid practical ways of writing a joke. And I've written 22 that should be told in the next 5 minutes. And then beyond that, it's the advanced one that I mentioned earlier, the cinematic system of stand-up. That's designed to help more advanced open mic acts move to the paid and pro circuit using these film metaphors. And then there's one for emceeing, how to be a brilliant stand-up comedy MC, because good MCs are rare. Like there's lots of comics around, but somebody who can MC well is actually highly in demand. And if one can MC, then you're going to get so much more of the all essential stage time. Because when I MC a show, I'm on stage for around about 28 minutes. Okay. Now, if I'm going out for the night to do an open mic spot, there might be 5 minutes or 10 minutes. You can see I'm getting something like 3 to 6 times the stage time just by virtue of being MC. However, I'm also using different comedy muscles, the crowd work muscle and keeping the show on pace and paying attention to what the act that was just on, what they were talking about. And can I quickly come up with a joke
exactly.
on topic? Hey, Dave was just here talking about being on holiday in Greece. I was on holiday in Greece and move into it. And that comes with experience. So you'll actually get more stage time by being an MC. You probably got more chance of getting paid as an MC sooner than you would
There you
being
go.
paid as an act. And as I say, you get to stretch these different comedy muscles and become a more fully formed performer. There's barely a pro comedian that's got a Netflix special that hasn't done lots of MCing. Like advanced acts are typically good MCs. And part of the reason they became advanced acts is because they spent so much time MCing, getting the stage time,
They got
getting
the
those
chops.
opportunities.
Yeah.
So, in answer to your question, it's all at the website, wearefunnyproject.com. But hopefully, there's somebody, whether they're thinking about doing it for the first time, to somebody who's ready to try and step away from the amateur universe and into the paid
Well, I
universe.
think I would, if anything, look into it just because I admire your confidence, though. And again, that's the really thing, though, is like whether you have it or you don't. By doing this, you will naturally just become confident. I mean, Grant, you can say, "Oh, I'm sad, whatever." You can say you don't have confidence, but it does take, like you said, balls, stones, just that fearlessness to say, "Hey, I'm going to go on the stage and tell you about me." Like that is truly terrifying. And it's even more terrifying if you can kill that fear. Because now it's like, okay, now you're fearless. Let's go.
I think it's very hard to kill the fear. I've got, it's certainly within that first course stepping into, there's some very solid advice on how to manage those nerves. But I think reducing the fears and the nerves altogether is very hard to do without somebody just becoming like really jaded and experienced the way that I have, because I've been on stage so many times. I'm, you know, as soon as I hear my my entrance music come on, it doesn't matter if my back's hurting or I've had a bad day, I'm in the zone. For somebody who's starting early days, they should expect to be nervous. People should remember that courage isn't not feeling it. Courage is not feeling fear. Courage is feeling fear and doing it anyway. Okay. And the way that I can help people kind of break through that is to remind them that nobody in the room cares anywhere near as much as they do. So while they might go, oh my God, I didn't get a laugh at all. That felt terrible. I've just died on stage. Yeah, it's not a great feeling. And it is awful to leave stage with, you know, no laughter. Okay, that's what we're aiming for, is you always want to leave the stage with laughter in the room. But it's inevitable that's going to happen, that you've avoided the laughter. What's important to remember is in an open mic room, the audiences have not paid to get in. They're not, you know, financially invested as though they've paid $20 for a pro club. You're only there for 5 minutes. The chances are there's a lot of great talent in open mic. The chances are the act before and after are going to be good at getting laughs. You know, a good MC such as myself, when I'm writing that running order, I don't put three brand new acts back to back. I pepper them through some more seasoned acts. So even if the show sinks for 5 minutes because this act's dying, we'll pick up again really quickly. So, you know, good promoters and MCs will have built in a protection system. Now, that's not to say the act won't leave the stage feeling rough. They will. It's a given. But we get back on the horse, so to speak, and you come back and you try again, try harder, and then you're that much closer to probably getting a big laugh. And that's when the reward system really kicks in. So it's important to act to remind themselves, while it feels all important to them, barely anybody else in the room cares. Okay. The act that did best on the bill, almost nobody in that audience will even remember their name at the end of the show. The amount of times I've heard, it's like, what, listen to couples as they're leaving the show, audience members, and one of them says, "Who did you like best?" And they go, "Oh, the fat guy in the red shirt." You know, they're not remembering anybody's name. They can't even remember any of the jokes the fat guy in the red shirt said. They just remember they liked it. So on the way in, I would recommend trying to mix up the feelings of fear with a feeling of excitement, because they're not very far from one
I
another,
like
those two
that.
emotions. So if somebody's close to their first gig or just a gig and they're feeling apprehensive, I would suggest to them, just ask yourself, what does this actually feel like? Well, I've got a funny feeling in my belly and there's like a tingling and, you know, I'm breathing heavy and I'm sweating. Yeah, that sounds like excitement. Maybe you want to think of this as about, you're about to go on a roller coaster, something that you've chosen that has a pronounced effect on you. You've made the decision, get up there and have fun. Okay. And it's really important to look like one's having fun on the stage, which, by the way, you did, you know, watching your set. You really clearly look like you were happy to be there.
It was
You were
fun.
delighted to be there. That makes a big difference. You know, when you're as good as Bill Hicks and you've been doing it for 20 years and you want to begin with, let me plaster on a fake smile, fine. You're so good, your jokes will carry the day. But for new acts, it's just generally a good sense to not let your nerves show and to give the impression you're happy to be there. You know, just like it would be first day at work in a new office or at a party, dinner party, house party, whatever it might be. Nobody ever wants to kind of hang out with the person that looks like they're
Exactly.
seeking out the exit. And so it is with comedians. You know, look like you're happy to be there. Even if they're not enjoying your show, give the impression that you are.
Hey,
Fake it
there
till
you
you
go.
make
Man,
it.
you're gonna drop in a lot of like again pearls of wisdom though. Can do things scared. Fake it till you make it though. Well, guys, again, it's wearefunnyproject.com. Whether I think is your email on there. If they just want to ask you questions or like get in contact with you, they could do so from there.
Alfie, Alfie, Alfie at wearefunnyproject.com.
There you go. Hey, just check him out though. I mean, again, he's the guy knows his stuff. He's been doing it for a while. You can clearly tell. I again just thanks for kind of like getting like into this with me. There were some questions I want to ask kind of more like away from this, if we can get into that.
Yeah, of course, anything you like.
Two things primarily is like, is there much of a difference between like the, I guess, audience or the humor style coming from, the UK kind of English or England side versus or the States side over here? I mean, is there much of a difference between us two as far as comedy wise?
I guess the question begs, like, at what level? So our top pro comics versus your top pro
Maybe, or
comics?
maybe like how the audience handles things better. Like I know one really kind of controversial topic is a race here. Like if you tell
Hmm.
a black joke in a room full of white people, they'll just buttholes pucker up. Uh, do they handle it better over there? Or they get just as
um,
nervous.
it's it's certainly changed since I began. There's been the whole woke wasn't an expression at the time. Me Too has happened.
That was my next question. So the woke thing. So
Yeah, there's certainly been a shift. I think by and large, if the joke's strong enough, anything goes. In an open mic room, it's important to remember that these are comedians. I've maybe ever seen two acts, and I remind you, it's over 10,000 have performed in front of me. Maybe two ever who just clearly came in with the intention just to piss everybody off, and they were
mm,
clearly on the spectrum, and it was in my mind they'd just obviously just written a list of the worst things you could write about and then try to write a joke to this horrific thing. And they had neither the experience, the skill, or the tastes to carry that off. We've got an incredible Scottish comedian over here, Frankie Boyle, who is just notoriously brutal and hard and comic genius. Um, you know, but he's one of our most famous and established comedians. If somebody pays 50 quid to go and see Frankie Boyle, they know what they're getting. Okay. But if you went to see Frankie Ball and you didn't know who he
mm.
was, I could see that would ruffle some feathers. So there's a certain case of let the buyer beware. I don't think our race issues in England are as deeply ingrained as they are over in the States, from what I gather. But let's be clear, I live in London. It's one of the biggest melting pots in the world. Britain is ostensibly a white country, but white people are less than 50% of the population in London, and this city functions very well indeed. We have pulled off the melting pot thing by and large. Of course, there's always problems here and there, but compared to the integration of a city like Paris, we are leaps ahead there. But yes, people are a little bit more sensitive if you bring up a certain subject, such as race, in a way they weren't 10 years ago. But I've really never seen, other than those two guys I just mentioned, somebody come into an open mic room and they were there to cause aggravation. It could be they're trying to be a bit edgy. They're a fan of somebody like Jimmy Carr or Frankie Boyle, and they're trying to get to that Doug Stanhope type of comedy, and they don't yet have the skill set. And I put it to people when they criticize those folks, I'm like, how the hell will we ever have another Doug Stanhope if we don't give them a safe place to fuck around and try this edgy comedy? Because I can see them. I know who they are. I can tell by their manner. Are they just trying to be assholes and offend people? Or are they scratching at an idea of a joke and it hasn't quite worked this time? And God bless them, they're going to go away and rewrite the joke and try again and come back. And if places like the We Are Funny project don't give them the safety to try and fail until they succeed, well, we're not going to have great comedians in 10 and 15 years' time who can do that kind of comedy. It's important for the comedian to learn how to thread the needle, and that's for them to figure out. But for me, there's no topic they can't talk about. I will say this, though, if a comedian came on stage and dropped the N word, I don't know how well I could handle that if I thought it was in any way meant nastily. And I will make this point as well. In 13 years, only two people have ever said the N word
Mm.
on my stage. One was a black guy who said it only because I'd said already on stage that nobody's ever said the N word. Okay, so let's stop being so worried about this stuff. At that point, maybe I was 6 or 7
Okay.
years into doing this. I'm like, let's just be clear. People seem to be getting worried about what's said, but nobody's saying it at all. Nobody's ever done it. So he took that as a license to walk on stage, and he just did nothing but say the N word for the next 2 minutes, which I found repulsive and not funny at all.
Sorry, I'm sorry I'm laughing. That's not funny. That's
each to their own. And then there's another one was a white middle class lady who's very lovely, and she was basically telling a joke about her
Mm.
boyfriend's mum, who is a racist of like a different generation, the idea that grandparents are racist. And her whole set was really about, thank God she's about to die. Okay. Because we'll no longer have people who name their black dog and then she says the N word. Okay. It is very much clearly a joke about, the older generation probably are a bit more racist, but good news, they're leaving soon. Okay, that's really what that joke was about. But of course, a couple of people decided to take exception because that word can't be said in any circumstances. She was playing with fire. I would never do it myself. But her spirit, the objective of the joke was in the right place. That's beyond question in my mind. But nonetheless, a couple of people decided to take umbrage. But then again, I'm a white guy. It's not for me to necessarily decide how offensive a word is. But I know this. I've definitely taught my son that it's a word never, ever to be spoken. And he understands the history of that word and why it's never to be spoken. And I think that's the best we can do. But people need to play to the edges. We don't just want clean comedy all the time. There's some great clean comedians, don't get me wrong, but I like the guys like the Bill Hickses and the Doug Stanhopes who will come and shake my brain around, say the unsayable, so to speak, and then give me a brand new angle on it and go, actually, yeah, there's something in that.
So how do you balance that? How do you balance the trying to again make comedy inclusive, not have people push that stuff, but where you, like you said, you clearly see someone trying to do the edge stuff. I guess how do you find or see the difference between someone being edgy and someone trying to scratch at something? The worst thing, you see what they're doing, but it's like again, it's a very either dirty topic or they're doing it in a very shitty way. How do you admin that versus like when you have to shut it down, you're like, absolutely not. You're cut off, you're 86.
I've never had to shut anybody down for material, not once, apart from the guy that I said who thought he was Frankie Boyle and he just wrote 5 minutes about acid attacks and I mean, it was just awful, but equally bad because it wasn't even close to funny. He was somebody who was just on the spectrum, had made a very bad decision, and I'm confident never tried to do that again. Otherwise, I've maybe seen a very small, I mean, I'm talking single digits number of people that you could see had like a twinkle in their eye where they were trying to aggravate people. It's so rare that it's not even worth worrying about in my mind. Everybody else I've seen who's gone to the edge and failed because they didn't get the laugh or they didn't get the spirit of what they were trying to do across, to my way of thinking, I can see them. I can see what they're trying to do. I've spent enough time in a comedy club at this angle, close to the stage. I've probably known them to some degree off stage. It's really a bad idea to try and be an edgelord comedian in your earlier days. Like you need a really higher skill set to do something like Frankie Boyle might do or Doug Stanhope might do. So I would urge people to stay away from edgelord material in their earliest iterations of comedy. Just learn how to tell a joke, how to write a funny story or whatever it might be. And then later on, year 2, 3, whenever it might be, each has their own path and journey. Then maybe you want to start inserting some of this edgy comedy. And even then, I would not recommend making the whole set like that. I'd maybe have 2 minutes on quote unquote online dating, maybe a minute of edgy stuff on whatever topic du jour you want it to be, and then maybe 2 minutes of airline food banalities at the end, whatever it happens to be. But trying to be edgelord fast and for the entirety of your set, these are
Because
both big
it
mistakes.
really kind of comes down to it's like again, like you can. I don't want to be like, okay, say the N word next set, make that a thing. But it's like again, it's like if you, because that's why I essentially love.
It just seems like a minefield that's not worth approaching
It's
to say something
not.
like the N word. It's just there's so many things that can be spoken about in this world that why even go there unless there's a very good reason. For example, a friend of mine is a black guy, but he was adopted in the 70s by a white family. Okay. And who was the only black person at his all white school. Okay. He's got some stories that involve the N word that are entirely appropriate for him to talk about. And again, it's not my decision what is or isn't appropriate outside of my room. Okay. But he's got stories that are worth telling. And a lot of comedy is about raising tension and then releasing that tension with the punchline and the jokes. So talking about spiky and thorny issues, contentious issues, well, these are classic ways of having the tension there. And then boom, it's not what the audience
There's that
thought. It's
surprise.
something else. Very often it's the darkest instincts and thoughts of the audience that the comedian can play with and then say, it's this over here. What were you coming up with, you monsters, as he speaks to the
Exactly.
audience? So again, a long answer to your question. The landscape has changed. I personally feel that anything goes if it is funny and coming
Good
from
place.
the correct place.
Exactly.
And Ricky Gervais, obviously, is a highly controversial comedian. I think his last special was specifically designed to antagonize certain parts of the woke community. And as a result, I felt it was the worst special he'd done. But nonetheless, I'm grateful for the Ricky Gervaises of this world who are genuinely brilliantly funny and are willing to poke at things and will very often give us a different angle. I just don't think it served him in the last special, but I don't imagine Ricky cares what I've got to think about this. And I trust his next special, he'll just be back to being as brilliant as he's been in everything else.
Sitting on his large pile of money, doing fuck all.
Yeah, but he doesn't just sit there on his large pile of money. That's almost besides the point. He's constantly creative. He could be doing anything he wanted. They gave him a Muppet movie, for Christ's sake. And what he decides to do is Afterlife, which is this kind of parochial sitcom about a grieving widower. It is set in small town England. That's not exactly rock and roll Hollywood type of stuff that he could be doing if he chooses. At the end of the day, Arnold Schwarzenegger's got a great quote on this. He goes, "I know money doesn't make you happy, because I've now got 30 million and I'm no happier than I was when I had 20 million. You know, top professional artists will get paid handsomely, but they still have artistic instincts that they want to pursue. The question is, what will they do with it once they've got that safety net behind them? And Ricky Gervais, thank God, has decided to keep on poking the bear on behalf of so many other people. Not always in a way that I'd like for him to do it, but thank God somebody's doing it.
So that is important because that was going to be a question essentially like the whole like woke attitude, the culture. Has it ultimately done better for us? People being more aware of these things, or has it done worse things for us?
I think it's obviously both at the same time.
That's the right answer.
It's not an either or choice. It's not a binary choice. There were some improvements that definitely needed making. There's the behaviour of young men in particular. I look back at my generation. I'm in my 40s, and there's just things that I look back on going, that was clearly out of order. And I'm not saying anything really wild or crazy or criminal here, and not even my own behaviour necessarily, just behaviour I saw at parties. It was the generation that wasn't far from things like Animal House, where he's got an angel on one shoulder and a demon on the other. I mean, could you imagine now? Or films like Revenge of the Nerds, which has got like an outright kind of
drunk
rape scene in it. But that was kind of even the first Police Academy film. Like, this was the kind of raucous humor that was mainstream in the 80s. And some of that shit needed correcting. No two ways about it. No two ways about it. On the other side of the coin, we both know that the Twitcher generation are small percentages of the Twitcher generation can sometimes make a huge amount of loud noise over fuck all and really end up hurting somebody or hurting an institution or an art form or whatever it might be. So yeah, improvements needed to be made. Bad people, the Harvey Weinsteins of this world, needed to be, held to rights and punished accordingly. There was lots that needed doing. But where does the pendulum stop swinging?
Like I said, it's somewhere in between, and I think that's the great human answer. Is like we have to figure that out together. And I think more than anything, I think we need to definitely get off the whole digital mindset though, because I mean, like you even mentioned though, the whole Twitter community though, I think at one point there maybe could be somebody trying to save somebody, someone trying to open somebody's door, but then you have the other side where people like again they want to make a splash. They want to get their 5 seconds of fame on the internet. Like, hey, I'm gonna do something, and they don't care who they're hurting. They don't care what they're pushing. They just.
I think a good metric is, would you say that to somebody's face? Okay. Now, for men, typically speaking, it's understood that if men have a problem with one another, we're more likely to become aggressive. It could be to the point of violence, depending on the people and the circumstances. But we tend to be quite direct in letting it be known we're not happy with X, Y, or Z. Females tend to fight on the basis of reputation destruction. Okay, so obviously women are physically outpowered by most men, so they have to fight in a different way. But also women will fight that way with other women. Reputation destruction, like the Mean Girls thing. You talk about Mean Girls even in your set. The Mean Girls thing of starting a rumor kind of thing. Men don't typically start rumors about each other. We might punch each other in the mouth, and we may or may not be able to even go for a drink together an hour later because it's sorted. Exactly. We may or may not. But the reputation destruction thing tends to be a slow, nasty, corrosive burn. And I think the nature of digital media being what it is just people aren't able to very often kind of see the hurt, the ringing on somebody. If I say something offensive to somebody and I see like a something in their eyes. I'm like, oh my God, that came across wrong or too strong, whatever it might be. I can react in real time and try and fix the mess I've created for myself and that person. Sometimes they need to be told the cold hard truth, and that pain in their eyes is maybe the wake up call
Right.
that they needed. But it seems to me that, you know, the typed form, the uniform font of the different, you know, platforms and all, everybody seems to have about the same standard of official basis when you read it on whatever form, font, shape it comes in. And people aren't able to read one another's feelings in a way they did before. And also, it's pretty hard to offend 250 people simultaneously, or 250,000 people simultaneously in the
Exactly.
real world. And this is skewing people's kind of abilities to communicate. And of course, there's those arseholes out there, the troll type people who just take pleasure in it. And, you know, we all knew one of those in the school playground as well, or the creepy guy in the office, or the edgelord in the pub. You know, we've seen these people in real life, but they just realised they better be careful, otherwise they could get punched in the mouth. That's not the way
I
it
also
works
think
on
it's
the
just the
internet.
fact that like they can't physically see anybody. That's like again, it's like that kind of whole like that defense of like I can't get away with something. I like you aren't gonna punch me in the mouth. I can say these things. I can say these hurtful, destroying things though, and not even be held accountable. If anything, I can again with one keystroke destroy an entire franchise or somebody's career, and it's like I don't know. It just I think like you said, I think it does take some type of accountability where it's like I think people need to make it maybe take a step back and think of it in both ways. Is there truth to this? Is there potentially lies to this? It's like, are we blowing this out of proportion in one side to the other, though? Again, I just think it does take like some type of stepping back from it and reflection to truly think about stuff rather than just seeing it and immediately reacting.
Well, I mean, let's take this back to the world of stand-up comedy again. So, you know, one of the reasons I think I was several years into stand-up before I realized this, but because I was a film journalist, I spent most of my time, sometimes I'd watch 14 movies a week at the cinema. Every single film that was getting any kind of release, it could be a 50th anniversary re-release or whatever it might be. I had to see every single movie. An average week would be 8 films at the cinema. And then I'd be out filming, and then I'd be back in an edit suite. I spent my entire life on a screen before most people even had a home computer. So by the time everybody being on screen all day long and, you know, connected with fast internet broadband and the like came around, I'd kind of had enough of time being on screen. I think that's why live comedy appealed to me so much, because it's somewhere between having the idea, writing it down, fleshing it out, but it's ultimately one person's mouth into a microphone into their ears. It's a very fast and instant response system. You can have the idea and get it out quickly, but it's also a super fast feedback loop. You know, you tell the joke and they laugh or they don't. And if they do laugh, then there's different laughs to consider. Is it a small chuckle? Is it just the men in the room and not the women? Because it's, you know, of a certain style of joke that maybe females are less
Is
likely
that
to
belly
get.
laugh?
Maybe it's a joke that makes the older members of the audience laugh because there's a reference point that they get that an 18-year-old might not. And as somebody gets deeper into their comedy career, they can become more adept at bringing the whole room in and going, if I change that word here, or if I explain that here, I can get everybody laughing at this joke instead of just this portion at this point and this portion at that point. And you can see the effect you're having on the audience. And when that effect is a wonderful effect, as in you've made them all laugh and laugh hard, Jesus, what an amazing feeling that is. That is rock and roll time right there. So I kind of stepped away without quite realizing from being in front of a screen all the time for the ultimate and live experiences, immediate feedback of stand up. It's a good thing to get off the internet for a while. Stop looking at YouTube videos or doom scrolling or whatever. Go into a room and look into the eyes of an audience member and pray you can make them laugh.
Shake hands, feel flesh upon flesh. Just again, just get out of the digital space, get out of the matrix, man, just for a second.
Yeah, as with everything, you can have too much of a good thing and not enough of a good thing. It's all most things are about balance, and I speak as a man who's failed to balance many
Yeah,
aspects of his life many times. But ultimately, my aged wisdom has told me that most things are about an appropriate balance. I'm not saying, you know, throw your smartphone away and only go on a stage. That would be insane. But maybe a little less time on your phone and maybe more time looking somebody in the eye in the pub, the bar, the golf club, the football club, the comedy club, whatever it might happen to be. A little bit more human interaction. I think we're becoming a bit disconnected.
I think we kind of like touched on a lot of like really good like lessons I think people can take from this episode is, you know, balance in a lot in everything. Just like if well, because even that's a balance too. It's like you can't have too much balance. It's like, you know what, like my friend's racist, but I kind of like it's just regardless. balance is important. I think self-reflection is important. I think things should be done scared because most of the time they are done scared. Most importantly, stand-up comedy. And yeah, I think these are all really good things.
Most things that are worth doing, most things that are worth doing are ultimately scary and hard.
I like that. I think if anything, that might just be the
Most of, I mean, don't get me wrong, I would never do something like a parachute jump or a bungee jump. They
what?
scare me and I see no value. They have no appeal to me. I would never do that at all. But people that I know have done bungee jumps and parachute jumps, when they've heard that I've done stand-up comedy, are like, oh my God, you're so brave. I just find that insane. I've met soldiers who I know have been in active combat zones tell me I'm brave for doing stand-up comedy. To me, that's absolute crazy. Okay, there's scared and there's scared, but each to their own. But this is one that you're not going to get a bullet hole or hit the ground at 250 miles an hour because your parachute didn't open. The worst thing that happens is a sting of embarrassment and at very least, the ability to every dinner party forever tell everybody who once did comedy.
Exactly. And then it's over.
How bad can it be?
Well, I did mention before I want to come back to it though. I was checking out your YouTube channel. He is on YouTube as well, Alfie. I'll bring up your YouTube channel in a second though. But I remember you had an interview with Bill Hicks, which I'm apologize. Like that should get way more views, and I'm gonna hope that some of my listeners can check that out too, because I know a couple of Bill Hicks comedians that you got a chance to do that with. I mean, how did you like that? How did you enjoy it? And I mean, was Bill Hicks maybe one of your favorite comedians?
Bill Hicks is one of my favorite comedians. And when I was 19, I had the privilege to see him. I think it was the year before he died of pancreatic cancer, maybe 2 years before he died. Amazingly, he came to my hometown in the north of England, which is a relatively small town. But we'd picked him up on, I think, Reckless or Relentless, I forget. We'd seen that show he'd done at the Just for Laughs Festival in Montreal. His special was on Channel 4 here. And, he became such a favorite amongst me and my teenage friends that, he became part of the lexicon. We were quoting Bill Hicks alongside Bill and Ted and the Blues Brothers and whatever else was part of our kind of most beloved cultural moments. But that interview was given to me by a television colleague over 30 years
Wow.
ago. And I've been looking after it all that time. This is the unedited rushes from a long form interview. So a little bit of this went out to broadcast television, but this is 28 minutes, of which I think 26 minutes is brand new and not been seen anywhere before. And you're right, it really hasn't caught the traction that I imagined it would. I don't quite know how the algorithms work, but I thought that would be a big splash. And it's only got a few thousand views
It's,
at
I
this
mean,
time.
and you got it all broke up into parts on here though, and definitely can't recommend checking out though. But I mean, it's just more kind of like because he was such like a force. But I mean, like it. Do you think it was the cancer or the fact that he was seeing his own death that he just like stopped giving a shit, or he just like went for the jugular?
No, he never gave a shit in the first place. No, he was always the real deal. I mean, I've heard Rogan talk about it on his show, saying that he's literally the only comedian he's ever seen that actually didn't care. And then he tells this lovely story about him demonstrating that on stage. No, he was an absolutely fearless comedian. I mean, he's of such a stature that you if you've ever been like into a music shop or something, but certainly back in the day, I'm sure it's obviously more online now, but back in the day, if somebody was a musician trying to put together a band, they'd put up a poster or a sign in the local music guitar shop and saying, "Hi, I'm trying to put together a band. Our influences are the Smiths, whoever it might be." And it is in comedy. Typically, new comedians, you see them channeling who their favorite comedian is. And I wonder if anybody has created more wannabes and lookalikes in comedy ever than Bill Hicks did. I mean, there were just millions, well, maybe not millions, but thousands of acts tried to be the new Bill Hicks. There really was just the one. When I first began in comedy 13 years ago, the amount of acts I saw coming through trying to be Russell Brand
Yeah.
or Eddie Izzard was quite stunning. You see people trying to channel their favorites. And you know what? It's perfectly okay and it's perfectly normal. And then as they get further into their skill set of being in a band, they might want to sound like the Smiths, but they can't. So then they create their own sound. And new comedians often end up trying to be like X, Y, or Z, but very quickly they find their own groove, character, rhythm, persona, and continue accordingly. But Bill Hicks was an absolute great, and I'm super privileged that I got to see him.
I mean, yeah, especially again, like he passed. It really is like I haven't got a chance to see him enough, but I mean, just like his energy is it's almost indescribable because like again, like just watching his fearlessness, like he'll look at the audience in the eye and just like or he'll play chicken with a
You know,
train, and the train will move. It's like it's crazy.
he's a high status comedian who had the goods to back it up. And, you know, to me and my friends' teenage minds, he just gave us so many new angles to think on things as our teenage brains were forming. You know, he was a man of a certain time. You know, he landed around about the same time as grunge music would have been. It was that kind of early 90s kind of vibe. He was the right voice at the right time. He actually had a new TV show that he'd been signed up for over here in England. Channel 4 had signed him up
Mm.
for a chat show that he was going to be the host of, called Lords of the
Oh,
Netherworld.
that sounds so sick.
And I believe the first and only guest that they had booked for him, and then the pancreatic cancer diagnosis came in, so obviously it fell apart. But his first booked guest was to be Noam
Oh,
Chomsky. So that would have been fascinating, that we would have had a 6-part British TV show. Channel 4, certainly back in that time, I used to make a lot of shows for them. You know, they were kind of the edgy show. I'm pretty sure they would have given him that at like 10:30 on a Friday night, where you
oh
could
my
do
God.
anything in that time slot. We used to have some really crazy TV shows then. But the idea that we could have had a TV show where Bill Hicks is interviewing people like Noam Chomsky is a
And the
terrible
fact that
loss.
like you can only imagine like he would ask like the out there questions. So the questions like you wouldn't
Mhm.
think to ask that, but he's just gonna, I don't give a shit. Fuck it. It's my show. Do what I want.
Yeah.
I think you can't tell, but our 5 minutes is up though. I got the MC. He's flashing the light. He's telling me to get the hell off the stage though. We got time for one more closer before we end the episode.
Sure.
Comedy route Mount Rushmore. Kind of talked about it a bit though. I mean, you can do actors if you want, but I'm really kind of interested as far as like not even just influences, just like what are four comedians you think are at least the goats for you? And I would love to get like a time frame. It's like, okay, maybe here's an older one, here's a newer one, but I mean, just kind of curious.
All right. So Billy Connolly, the Scottish comedian, the wonderful human being that is Billy Connolly, him and a British comedian called Jasper Carrott, which I'm guessing you've never heard that name over that side of the Atlantic, is just a weird name. They actually came from a tradition of folk musicians, these
Okay.
guys. And I don't know if you know this about Billy Connolly. He used to be in a band with Jerry Rafferty, you know, the guy who does that famous song
Y-
Baker Street
Yeah,
with the
okay. So
saxophone
he
solo.
was he in the song, that
Yeah.
actual song, or was he just in that band?
No, Jerry Rafferty made that
Okay.
song years later, but in the early days, Billy Connolly and Jerry Rafferty were in a folk band together. And basically, Billy would start telling stories between songs when they were performing as folk musicians. And as time went on, his stories and his jokes became equally or more popular than the actual music that Jerry was performing. So they went and
Okay.
parted company. But Billy Connolly and Jasper Carrott were my first kind of introduction to stand up when I was a young kid. Like my dad had tapes and things. And he's never stopped being anything other than brilliant. I had the privilege of seeing him live about 5 years ago. Sadly, his health's not so great now, so I don't know if we'll see much more from the begin. But Billy Connolly created almost an industry, you know, the sold through VHS, DVD, all that kind of thing. Billy Connolly was a much greater pioneer than most people, I believe, give him credit for. He's a wonderful human being. He's possibly the greatest storyteller I've ever witnessed, and never less than hilarious. Other than the fact that comedy, I should put a disclaimer here, stand-up comedy typically doesn't age very well. So what was absolutely amazing, like I'm thinking of Billy Connolly at the Royal Albert Hall, was a big show here in the 80s. I imagine that's not very
Hmm.
funny anymore, because comedy just doesn't stand the test of time that well. A lot of Bill Hicks stuff isn't. If you've got younger listeners on this, some 20-year-old guy listens to Bill Hicks now, he might be wondering why we're talking about him the way we are. It's like, well, you should have been there at the time. You've seen 1,000 people try and copy him since and copy that style, and that in-your-face style is relatively common now. But Bill Hicks, maybe can't say pioneered it, but took it to another level. So number 2 on Mount Rushmore after Billy Connolly would indeed be Bill Hicks, the first comedian that truly blew my mind, truly changed my way of thinking about things. And as I said, became part of the kind of lexicon between me and my teenage friends, like huge influence on me.
Okay. We got two at least. You got two more spaces though.
Okay, so I'll go with a British comedian again called Harry Hill. He's very well known here.
Yeah, don't mind me. I'm just researching everything here because like there are some people like I don't know those names
Sure.
though, but I feel bad for Bill Connolly. I think I only primarily know him just for his like acting bits. Like again, I
Well, he's done a lot. He's been very successful as acting. He was in, Billy Connolly was in The Last Samurai with Tim Tom Cruise.
He's the papa.
He was in the Boondock Saints. You know, he's the man who sued God.
And he also did a little throwaway role in Lemony Snicket's Series of Unfortunate Events, even though he was like just there for half a second. I liked him. He was charming. I'm like, yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, everybody likes Billy Connolly. I think he's best friends with people like Dustin Hoffman and Steve Martin and all. I mean, he's royalty, but he's got the down to earthness of a good solid Glaswegian dock worker, which is kind of where he came from. So yeah, Billy Connolly, Bill Hicks,
this guy,
Harry Hill.
Fun.
Harry Hill is a household name here in England, but when I first moved to London 30 years ago, he wasn't. And where I came from, there were no comedy clubs. So my very first weekend of living in London, I went straight to a comedy night above a pub in Soho. And for £5 I got to see Ian Stone, who's still a working circuit comic today, Mark Thomas, who I saw at the Leicester Square Theatre about 6 months ago. He's had his own TV show, the Mark Thomas Comedy Product. You'll enjoy that. There's lots of clips from that. That was a 90s show, but lots of that on YouTube. He's a rabble-rouser, anti-establishment comedian, very much a campaigner, would run campaigns against selling arms to foreign dodgy governments and, you know, holding our government to account, this kind of thing. Brilliant comedian. If Mount Rushmore was a little bit bigger, I might put Mark Thomas on there, but I'm going to give it to Harry Hill. Harry Hill was on the bill that night at my first ever comedy club when I was 19. And he made me laugh so hard that I had to scrabble over people in this pub. It was maybe 50 people in the upstairs room of a pub. I had to scrabble over people to get out of the room, to get outside of earshot of what he was saying, because I was laughing so hard. I thought I was going to pass out. Literally thought I was going to pass out. I had to leave the room to get away from the laughter he was inflicting on me. And then about 3 years later, I went to see him at the Cambridge Theatre, Cambridge Circus in London, which is, I think, a 2,000-seat West End theatre. It's where they put the Harry Potter West End play, Harry Potter and the Lost Child, I think it's called. When the Harry Potter play arrived, that's where they put it. So it's the same theatre Harry Hill had 3 years later. 2,000 people, I imagine. And he did it to me again. This time it's such a big room, I'm having to clamber over like 50 people, like a, middle of the row of a cinema or something, to clamber over these people. I'm like, the fact that you were going to make me pass out because I could not catch my breath from laughing in a tiny little intimate pub, and you can do that in a 2,000-seat theatre. I've never seen a comedian even come close to doing that to me in either environment, and he did it twice.
Okay.
So Harry Hill.
We got our three, and then the last fourth one. This has got to be important.
And I'm going to go with Chappelle. I know it's the most obvious choice at the moment, but I think the guy's just on fire, an absolute natural. He started so young that he's already got such a body of work there. I'm not a fan of how he's been treated over the recent period. I forget which of his recent Netflix specials it was. And when I say recent, it's probably 4 or 5 years ago now. But in one of them, obviously, he got a lot of grief from the trans community, and I've got no comment on that. What I will comment on is in the same special, he warned them that the certain political people were making moves to remove Roe versus Wade, and they should watch out.
That's right, he did.
And they decided, and they decided to make a big deal about things that I think at very worst were open to interpretation, but I'm not opening that kind of worms. But actually, he told them flat out, you want to be watching out for this. They decided to attack him on another issue, and look what happened. And maybe if there'd been a little bit more awareness that change was coming, maybe a huge amount of women in your country wouldn't be suffering that shit today.
And people honestly forget that same.
And he's funny as hell, by the way. Let's be clear, just because that's one great comment and point he made. He's just tremendous. I mean, never not funny, never not likable, never anything other than fascinating. And yeah, thank God that there's Dave Chappelle.
He's a go, and I'm proud of you for like hooking it up with like at least this colored person on there, because I'm like, we got 3 white boys. Like, is it going to be a woman? Is it going to be?
Do you know what? It didn't even cross my mind to look at anybody in regards to their race or their gender or anything. I've got feelings about which kind of members of the community tend to make the better comedians, and frankly, I give that to the young black lads. If I've seen so many new people come through in comedy, I think if anybody's got a natural ability for it, it's younger black men are instinctively better at stand-up comedy than any other group, whether it's older women or younger white people, whatever it might be. Black people in stand-up just punch way above their weight, and history shows us that. Such a long, fantastic tradition of black comedy, just amazing. Just as in almost everything else, by the way, such as music and sport. The black community represent, and they represent
I'm
well.
trying not to make that the episode. Like it's like this episode was made for, BBC, big black comedians. But yeah. Oh, we'll figure that one out though. But regardless, I totally agree with everything you said though, and you gave me some comedians to check out though. Dave Chappelle, he's the GOAT, and we kind of touched on it very recently. You said that some comedy doesn't age well. Some comedy ages so well it becomes prophecy, and it's scary. George Carlin is one of those where like
Yes.
I was
Yeah.
watching, I was
Yeah.
like, oh
Yes.
my
Yes.
God, he's just hitting on. It's not funny anymore. Now it's just sad because it's like this has just happened this way. So I mean, comedy, man.
Yeah. Again, if your Mount Rushmore was that bit bigger, I mentioned Mark Thomas, but Carlin would have been, if there was 6 or 7 faces on there, I would have had
Rushmore's
Carlin there as
hard.
well. But no, you're right. A lot of the best art, science fiction, comedy. You're right. It's prophecy. It's warnings. It's an insight. It's seeing things in a different way, and then actually warning us. Oh, yes, not just given the standard narrative, and that's why film and comedy often overlap. It's about giving somebody what they think they understand, misdirecting them, taking them over here with a surprise and a
Exactly.
new idea. Stupid people can't do comedy.
That's
Okay, stupid people can't be great filmmakers. You need a
I
certain
disagree on the
intellect.
filmmakers because or yeah, no, because
Because what American Pie exists, or one of
oh
the
dude,
silly
no
kind of teen
no.
comedies. Have you any idea how hard it is to make a film like that and make it work? It's incredibly hard. Even just to run a set and have 60, 80, 200 people around you, that in itself is a skill. Nobody ever set out to make a bad movie. And there's an awful lot of people, you'll hear it. I've done interviews with lots of them where the film turns out to be a bit of a stinker and you can't talk about it with them then. George Clooney was always very open about it
Oh
with the
God.
Batman and Robin film. He was like, I've never seen a star basically during the publicity junket
That's
acknowledge that
hilarious.
the film sucks, you know. But no, very few people know when they're making the film that it's not working. Sometimes they do because the director's having a meltdown every day or whatever it is. But a lot of the time, they think they've made something very special, and it's only when you get out of the edit that you know where it's at. Comedy, much easier. You write it down, you
You
practice it,
practice
you
it.
rehearse
There you
it, you
go.
redraft it, you tell it to a crowd, spot how the jokes worked, and then polish it up and try again.
Well, here's to hoping, at least as far as like comedy, movies, future, science fiction, though, that this continues to either grow, it gets better. It's gonna ebb and flow. We're gonna have our highs, we're gonna have our lows. We may grow, we may subvert ourselves, we may ruin ourselves. If anything, it's probably this is gonna all be replaced.
There's a lot of choices there.
Oh yeah, but it's gonna get to the point where eventually this AI is gonna replace all this. I mean, there's gonna be a point where there's just gonna copy me, or I'm gonna be gone. We're gonna be gone. It's just gonna be just computers. So here's to hoping the robot overlords spare us, or let's keep writing jokes. So who knows?
Or creating an outstanding matrix for us to enjoy.
There you go. I want all the pizza, and I can't say the next part though because my wife's very beautiful and she'll get offended if I say anything. But I love you, honey.
I love you too, honey. Oh, you were talking to your wife, I understand.
There you go. Hey, there you go. Hey, well, if anything, like she's got love across the seas. But all right, man, Alfie, seriously, this has been such a lovely experience. I know we plugged your website. I know we got your email on here though. I mean, just kind of ask. So, I mean, like, are you working on anything? You doing anything right now currently, or anything we can pump out there for you?
Yeah, thank you. I've got lots going on. I've just written a second ebook called 8 Ways to Turbocharge Your Comedy, and that will be released on the website in the non too distant. But if somebody goes to the website, wearefunnyproject.com, and they sign up to our mailing list, then they will get a free download of my first ebook, which is 8 problems comedians run into and how to handle them. And then there's quite a few blogs on there, which has got lots of practical advice for comedians. And each time, if you're on the mailing list, each time I release a blog, which is about once a month, so people aren't getting bombarded, then they'll get an email with a link to that topic. I think the one I've just released is how to handle a bad stand-up gig. So there's a steady flow of decent information coming through. So sign up to the mailer and get the free ebook, 8 problems comedians face and how to handle them.
And you can actually check that out. Just literally go to wearefunnyproject.com, scroll all the way to the bottom. It literally says email address, get the ebook. I just put my email there, and if anything, I'm going to look to help improve my comedy and the problems how I can handle them. So, again, thank you.
And just to be clear, by the way, once you sign up, you'll get an email asking you to confirm. And once you've clicked that, which is very standard practice, but I'm amazed by how many people seem to do the first bit and then not the second bit, which means I get their name on the mailing list, but they don't get the book, and that doesn't seem right. So make sure you click that confirmation email, and then you get your book.
Rock and roll. I'm gonna do my clicking. You got my email. Just just do me a favor.
Click hard, baby. Click hard.
Just sell all my data to big money. Just flood my shit with spam, which I know you won't. But if anything.
No, I wrote. I promise you I
won't.
wrote.
Hey guys, again, thanks for coming on, Alfie. Though.
Thank you for having me. Much appreciated.
I'm really gonna have a good time checking out that ebook. To everyone else, though, seriously, do things scared. If we can end anything on this episode, is everyone's scared. But when you can do them scared, you'd be really surprised on the outcome. I'm Tristan. This is Alfie. This is another ordinary person with an extraordinary story. Thank you. Night. Thank you for listening to another episode of Ordinary People, Extraordinary Stories. If you're interested in helping the channel, feel free to click on the link below to get access to our Patreon, where we have exclusive episodes and clips not shown to the public. And of course, if you believe you yourself have an interesting story to tell, or know somebody who would be great for the show, feel free to email me back at OPESpodcast@gmail.com. That's OPES. That's the acronym for the show, Ordinary People, Extraordinary Stories, OPES, podcast@gmail.com. Thank you, everybody, and until next time.